Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show a really quick and easy method for painting your Khorne demons, ideal for games of 40k or Warhammer, Age of Sigmar. So the first thing I've done is I've primed this model white to give it a nice bright base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. Now the first step is I'm coming in with some Khorne red and I'm going to paint all over the model. Some of these other areas are going to be painted other colours later on, but I want to get a nice solid base coat of Khorne red all over the miniature. So this is going to be the foundation for the rest of the paint scheme. I really love Khorne red as a colour. I think it's a beautiful shade of red. It works really well for your chaosy demons, especially things like this Khorne Bloodletter. So I'm just applying a couple of layers of Khorne red all over the model, making sure I cover up all of that white primer till I get a nice solid smooth coat of Khorne red all over the demon. And after a couple of layers of Khorne red, you can see how I've got a nice smooth even base coat all over the model. Now with some Cadian flesh tone, I'm going to apply a dry brush all over the miniature. I want to be quite heavy with this dry brush to get a really stark contrast on the model, picking out all of the raised details, giving it a really bright highlight that's going to be a foundational part of our next few steps. By applying this dry brush, it's going to pick out all of those details, give them a really bright base coat. We're going to knock back with a shade in the next step. This is going to give us a really nice, natural looking appearance to our Khorne Bloodletter. So just apply a heavy dry brush all over the miniature with some Cadian flesh tone till you got an effect that you're happy with. And after I apply that dry brush, you can see it come in really heavy, picked out all of those raised details on the model. Now it's time to apply a shade and knock that back a little bit. So with some Carabolg Crimson, I'm going to apply this shade all over the model, making sure it doesn't pull too heavily, but I want it to sink into those recesses while staining that highlight we applied. And this is going to give a really nice base for the next few steps we're going to apply to get a really great looking demon skin really quickly. So just apply this shade of Carabolg Crimson all over the Bloodletter and then give it a little while to dry. And after that shade has dried, you can see how it's knocked back some of that brightness of that dry brush, but still left all of those details picked out and brightened up. So now it's time for a few more dry brushes to get that flaming red skin. So first of all, with some Evil Sunz Scarlet, I'm applying quite a heavy dry brush again all over the model. Where we've got that Cadian flesh tone dry brush, this is going to leave these parts being a little bit brighter and get us some nice tonal differences all over different parts of the demon, depending on how bright the layer underneath is. So I'm just dry brushing all over the Bloodletter, quite heavy again, with the Evil Sunz Scarlet, till I get a nice brighter red that I'm happy with. By dry brushing this, we're leaving that shade in all of the recesses, and we'll get a nice smooth transition as we apply different colours later on. This will give us a really nice natural look all over the body to the Bloodletter in a much quicker time than slowly trying to layer this up with paints. And after that dry brush of Evil Sunz Scarlet, you can see how it's brightened out some areas of the skin. So now I'm coming in with another dry brush, this time with Wild Rider Red. And I'm applying this slightly lighter than the dry brush I just applied, but making sure I catch most of the model with this dry brush of Wild Rider Red. By applying a few dry brushes over that shade we applied earlier, we're going to get a nice smooth transition from the darkest points to the brightest highlights, but all in much quicker time than layering these up, while also getting quite a nice natural look to this Khorne Bloodletter. So once again, I'm just applying an all-over dry brush of Wild Rider Red, this one being a bit lighter than the previous dry brush. With that dry brush applied, you can see how we're really getting that nice Khorne Demon look to the skin. So the final dry brush I'm coming in with is some Troll Slayer Orange. And I'm being very gentle with this one, just catching those raised details. I'm focusing this from the top of the model down, trying to keep my strokes in a vertical motion, so I just catch those raised and upwards facing surfaces with a light dry brush of Troll Slayer Orange. This will create that nice transition from the dark reds to the brighter orange, really giving that kind of flaming body effect that Khorne Bloodletters have. Be quite gentle with this step, just catch the most raised details. Make sure you're doing it in that downward stroke, so you get a nice natural highlight on all of the raised details and upwards facing surfaces of the Bloodletter. And after that dry brush is applied, you can see how it's picked out all of the skin. It looks a little bit messy now, but once we pick out the rest of the details, tidy it up, and we'll get a really nice looking Bloodletter at the end. So now with some Corvus Black, I'm going to pick out all of the details that I want to be black. So this is most of the rest of the model now. So I'm just painting areas like all of his sword blade, making sure I coat all of this with a couple of layers of Corvus Black so I get a nice solid coat. Later on I'll be coming in and doing some other effects to the sword, but for now I just want to paint it black. Also making sure I catch the handle to his sword as well. Catching this with a couple of layers of Corvus Black, obviously being really careful around the skin we've already painted and highlighted. For the horns, I'm picking out where they're growing out of his head, so I'm leaving some parts of it as skin, picking out other parts black, so I get a nice appearance of the horn growing out of his skull, and then painting the rest of the horns with Corvus Black. Also make sure I pick out these spines here on his back with some Corvus Black as well. Be nice and careful that I don't get it over any of the skin or anything I don't want to be black. And just picking out all of these details with some Corvus Black. And finally, I'm picking out his fingernails and the claws on his feet as well. Just catching these with some Corvus Black. And with all of the black details picked out, there's only a couple of base coats left to apply to the model. This is a really quick and easy method for painting these demons. So now with some Incubi Darkness, I'm going to pick out the tongue. You can pick this out with more purpley colour if you want, but I quite like this dark sort of greeny look to my Khorne Demon's tongues. But obviously you can pick out the tongue with whatever colour you like. Just make sure you're careful around all the other details. And just picking out the tongue with some Incubi Darkness. And with the tongue picked out, the final base coat left to apply is going to be the couple of gold details on the demon. And for this, I'm using Retributor armor. I'm just going to carefully pick out the guard and the hilt to his sword. So I'm just being really careful around this textured detail area here, just making sure I catch all of the guard with a couple of layers of Retributor armor. I'm also catching out the bottom part of the sword as well, just catching this with a couple of layers of Retributor armor. And with the gold details picked out, that is all of the base coats applied to the model. So now it's time to apply a couple of shades to a few of the areas. First of these is with some Nuln Oil. I'm going to pick out a couple of the areas that I want to darken down. I'm going to pick out a couple of areas like the handle to his sword, the spines on his back, Anywhere with a bit of texture that I want to add a bit more definition. I'm also picking out the tongue as well. Just catching a few areas with a bit of known oil. And finally, with some Agrax Earthshade, I'm going to shade the gold details. So I'm applying an all-over shade to everything we paint with Retributor armour. So on this model here, it's just a couple of the details on the sword. Just catching these. With some Agrax Earthshade. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And if you'd like to support the channel, please become a member by pressing the join button down below or joining me over on Patreon. And after those shades have dried, they've added a little bit of definition to those areas on our Khorne Bloodletter. So the first thing I'm going to highlight are the eyes. So for this, I'm coming in with Abaddon Black first. I'm going to carefully sink this into the recesses for the eye sockets. Obviously being careful around the skin, we've already painted and highlighted. I just want to sink a little bit Abaddon Black into those eyes. And then with some Flash Gits Yellow, I'm going to paint a small line of yellow in the eyes. It's going to give that impression of sort of fiery yellow eyes on the demon. So I'm just carefully applying a small line of Flash Gits Yellow in the eyes. With the eyes painted, he's got those fiery eyes of a Khorne demon. So next I'm going to highlight is the tongue. For this I'm using Calibite Green. And I'm just going to pick out any of the raised details, bits of texture, anything like that on the tongue. I'm just catching with a small highlight of Calibite Green. You don't need to apply too many highlights here, but I'm just catching a few small areas of detail with a little bit of Calibite Green. And with the tongue highlighted, next with some white scar, I'm going to pick out all of the teeth. For this, I'm just carefully applying small lines of white scar on all of the teeth to the Khorne demon. Trying to be careful not to get this over anything else, but just make sure I pick out all of those teeth with a little bit of white scar. And with the teeth picked out, the Khorne demon's really coming together. With the face painted, he's got his personality now. So next thing I'm going to highlight is all of the black details. For this, I'm starting off with Mechanica Standard Grey. I'm going to pick out all of the raised parts to the handle, just carefully applying all of those ridges with a highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey. I'm also picking out all of the raised parts to the spines on the model as well. This can be quite a chunky highlight. We're coming back in with a few other shades next. So by leaving this a little bit thicker, you'll be able to apply those other shades within this one. I'm doing much the same on the horns as well. All of the raised details, bits of texture, things like that. I'm just applying an edge highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey. It's just going to highlight those black areas, give the impression of light catching and adding some detail. And I'm doing the same to the claws on his feet, catching those ridges with a bit of Mechanica Standard Grey. And I'm also going to do the same on his sword as well. We'll be coming in later and painting a flame effect over this sword, but it's nice to have a good highlight already on the sword because it worked really well with the steps I'm going to do later. So I'm just making sure I apply that edge highlight all over the sword for this Khorne Bloodletter. With Mechanica Standard Grey applied, you can see we've picked out all of the areas of black on the model. So now with some Dawnstone, I'm going to apply another highlight within the Mechanicus standard grey we just applied. So on the handle to the sword, I'm keeping this nice and small. I'm just applying a bit of this within the Mechanicus standard grey I just applied, so a little bit of the Mechanicus standard grey is still showing. And for these spines on his back here, I'm making sure these are smaller. So there's a bit of Mechanicus standard grey showing through around the sides. And I'm doing the same for the horns on the head as well. So I'm painting smaller lines within the Mechanicus standard grey I just painted. This will give a really nice transition through the colours to a brighter highlight, give the impression of sharpness on all of these regions. So just take your time at this stage and apply some highlights of Dawnstone within the Mechanicus standard grey we just applied. And I'm doing the same on the sword as well. See, for this centre line here, I'm starting a little bit further up, making sure I paint this nice and thin so you can still see the Mechanicus standard grey showing through as I apply this edge highlight of Dawnstone. With that Dawnstone applied, the black details are really getting some definition. There's just one final highlight I want to apply to these areas, and that's with some Administratum grey. Just going to paint this within the areas of Dawnstone we just painted. So I'm focusing this towards the top of a lot of these areas, just making sure they're small, thin lines of Administratum grey, so you can still see the Dawnstone and Mechanicus standard grey showing through. This will really give the impression of sharpness to these areas, really sell the effect of these being sharp, natural black details on the Daemon. So I'm just working my way back around the model, applying these small highlights of Administratum grey in the Dawnstone we just applied. For the claws, I'm just focusing these towards the very tips, so the sharpest points of these details. And with the sword, I'm really focusing this towards the tip now, so starting closer on the centre line to the tip, and then just applying a thin edge highlight all the way along the blade, and keeping it nice and small and making sure the Dawnstone's still visible. And with the Administratum grey applied, that is the black details highlighted on the model. So now I'm just going to highlight the gold. I'm doing this with a little bit of Liberator gold. I'm just carefully applying a small edge highlight to all of the gold details, catching any sharp points, raised details, things like that. Just applying a small spot of Liberator gold, so it'll give the impression of light catching on the sharp edges. And with the gold highlighted, you can leave your Chaos Demon here, but there's one thing I'm going to do, paint a nice fire effect on the blade and really push this demon to the next level. So I'm starting off with some Evil Sun Scarlet, and I'm thinning this down to a glaze consistency, so adding a lot of water so it's really runny. I'm just going to glaze this on to parts of the blade, so focusing near the top and around some of the edges, just glazing on a little bit of this Evil Sun Scarlet, so we're going to get a nice sort of red effect on the blade. Make sure I do the underside of the blade as well, trying to catch about the same areas with this glaze of Evil Sun Scarlet. I'm applying it to these areas of the blade, and then I'm going to make sure it's fully dried before coming in with the next glaze on top. And that's going to be with the Evil Sun Scarlet again, but now I'm just applying it in a slightly smaller area. By doing this over a few layers, you'll get a nice transition from the black of the blade to a nice sort of deep glazed on red. And after a few layers of glaze, you can see how I've got quite a nice effect all over the edge of the blade. So now I'm coming in with some Evil Sun Scarlet, but just thinned down to use as a regular layer paint. and I'm applying this as a chunky highlight along the edge of the blade that we just glazed on the Evil Sun Scarlet. So because this isn't as thinned down, it's going to be a lot more potent and strong. It's going to have a lot more colour and pigment to it. So I'm making sure I apply that edge highlight. It's going to give the impression of a really hot edge to the blade. Really sell the impression that there's some fire on this Bloodletter sword. So just apply a sort of chunky edge highlight with the Evil Sun Scarlet all the way around the edge of the blade with the areas we glazed on. Edge highlight applied, giving the impression of the edge of the blade being really hot with a nice transition from the colder black. So now with some Wild Rider Red, I'm going to apply another highlight. I'm going to apply another edge highlight, going right around the very edge of the blade, obviously smaller than the one we just applied. We're making sure we leave a bit of that previous highlight visible. So just carefully apply an edge highlight of Wild Rider Red the way around the blade to the Demon. For some of these sharp points here, you can use the side of your brush. Other bits you may have to use the tip. Just make sure you apply a nice highlight all the way around that blade. With the Wild Rider Red highlight applied, there is just one final step left to apply to this Bloodletter to really sell that flaming sword effect. That's with some Troll Slayer Orange. I'm just going to carefully apply it, spot highlight some of the sharpest points on the blade. So I'm just catching all these sharp details on the very tip of the blade with a really thin edge highlight of Troll Slayer Orange, making sure all the previous colours are still visible. Just catching those sharp points with a bit of Troll Slayer Orange. And with that final highlight applied, that is how to really quickly and easily paint up a Khorne Bloodletter. So using these techniques, you can paint a whole army of these guys really, really quickly, ready for the tabletop in no time. So let me know in the comments down below, do you like demons, and are there any other demons you would like to see me paint? But thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy painting!